G'day guys, Matt here. This is the Subaru Crosstrek Hybrid. Now, if you're considering this hybrid version of the Crosstrek, I think you should reconsider. I'm going to tell you why in this review, so please do like and subscribe. And if you haven't already, make sure you check out my full detailed review on the entire Crosstrek range. Hit the link in the description, you'll be able to check it out. And look, there's a lot to cover, so let's get to it. Now, before we get down into the weeds, hit the link in the description and check out my full detailed review of the Subaru Crosstrek, because this isn't going to be as detailed. It's going to be a bit more abbreviated. I'm just focusing on the hybrid versions. I'm going to talk about what's under the bonnet, how they drive, the real world efficiency and the costs that you want to keep in mind when you are considering this car. And also, I'm going to run through the price and specs. I'll do that now actually. So there are two different versions of the hybrid available. The Hybrid L, which is the entry-level version at just over 38 grand. And then there's the Hybrid S, which is this one here, and it's just over 45 grand. So look, there's a bit of a spread between those two models, and the standard specifications that you get for both models is pretty good. You get things like LED lighting all around the car. You get alloy wheels, 17s on the base model, 18s on the higher grade version. But on this high grade version, you also get a sunroof, you also get different interior trim, a different stereo, and a few other features. But both models come with an 11.6 inch touchscreen media system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you want sat-nav built in, you need to buy the more expensive car. So I reckon it does offer decent value, not class-leading value, and considering it's a fairly big chunk of change over the petrol versions of this car, $3,600 more for the hybrid, it's something you're going to have to really want in order to justify the cost. But hey, I've got some really good alternatives to this car. I'll tell you them now. If you're shopping for a compact hybrid SUV, well, there are some really good alternatives to the Crosstrek. The first one that I recommend you check out is the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. You can hit the link at the top of your screen or in the description to check out my review of that vehicle. I think it's fantastic. It really is real world efficient. It's super practical, a really good size, but maybe a little bit too big for some people's needs. But hey, I reckon that it nails the brief, and it is the most convincing hybrid powered compact SUV on the market in Australia right now. But there are some other good alternatives, including the Hyundai Kona Hybrid. Now, you can hit the link in the description below if you want to check out my review of that model. I think it really does nail the brief for a lot of people. It is more practical than the last Kona, but maybe not as practical as a Corolla Cross. And also, I do think that it does have seriously good real-world efficiency on its side. So if that's your number one priority, it makes a whole lot more sense than this car. And finally, another model that I really like, the Honda HR-V Hybrid. Hit the link in the description below again, and you'll be able to check out that review. I really do like the hybrid version of the HR-V. It's just a shame it's quite expensive, although it doesn't seem all that expensive when you consider it against this. And it does have better real-world fuel efficiency on its side as well. So, hey, there are really good alternatives to the Crosstrek Hybrid. There's really not that much to differentiate the hybrid versions compared to the normal ones, just a few badges around the body of the car. But when it comes to boot space, I got to tell you something, people. The boot space is actually identical between the hybrid versions and the non-hybrid ones, but the thing that you miss out on here is a spare wheel. So instead you just got a tyre repair kit. That's because under the boot floor there is where the battery pack for the hybrid system hides. So I mean, for a car that's supposed to be able to cross treks or trek crosses or whatever it's supposed to do, you're not going to get far off-road without a spare. It's a bit of an issue. Just like the non-hybrid versions of this car, you get a 2-litre 4-cylinder horizontally opposed boxer engine and a CVT automatic and symmetrical all-wheel drive. But in the mix here, you also get a battery pack and a small electric motor to help assist things at lower speeds and help you use less fuel. So you can use electric mode at times in urban situations, or even at higher speeds, it might find itself dipping into EV mode. But hey, I'll tell you more about that in the driving section. You also might want to consider that there is a slight penalty when it comes to towing capacity. If you want to buy the hybrid version of this car, you'll see the figures on your screen now, and that means it is just a little bit less capable when it comes to towing capability. But hey, let's go for a drive. There's a bit to talk about here. Can you hear that? That faint whirring noise? That's a little speaker outside the car that tells people outside the car that you're in EV mode, just so they can hear you coming, because this car does dip in and out of EV mode a little bit at lower speeds, sometimes at higher speeds as well, but it's when you're pulling away from an intersection or pulling up to an intersection that you'll notice that the little EV light flashes up on the dashboard, and it makes you feel good about yourself in a way. So now it's just switched to EV, now it's switched off. So look, it is pretty active in the way that the engine and the EV system work together. They're constantly jumping between the two different modes, especially when you are doing urban driving. Hey, if that's what you do a lot of, then you will notice that you might see better benefit from this powertrain, but I just think that it doesn't really change the Crosstrek formula enough in order for me to say, well, it's the one you have to get. And especially when you consider the fuel use numbers. I'll tell you a bit more about that shortly, but look, it's also heavier than the standard version of the Crosstrek, so it does feel a little bit wobblier as well. It's not that the other version of the Crosstrek feels really, really light on its feet or agile or fast or anything like that. It's just that this feels like it's sort of wobbles along the road a little bit more. So that's something you might want to keep in mind as well. Plus, if you do a lot of stop-start driving, there is regenerative braking built into this powertrain and the braking system, so the brake pedal feel is different in this car compared to the non-hybrid Crosstrek. It also can take a little bit of getting used to, because it's kind of got this dead sort of patch at the top of the pedal before it starts to bite. That's typical of some hybrid models or EV style models, but yeah, it's not necessarily bad brake feel, it's just not as good as some other cars. It just doesn't have the same sort of urgency or responsiveness that you get if you buy a Corolla Cross Hybrid, for instance, or even a Yaris Cross Hybrid, which has a very raucous little 3-cylinder hybrid powertrain. Yeah, I just think you can get so much better performance from other cars at similar money or less. So if performance is your #1 priority, hey, go buy a WRX. There is also a sport mode. You can choose S on the SI drive system and basically get a little bit more perk out of this car, but it's not really perky, I would say. Now, look, I also want to call out the fact that otherwise, this car does have pretty nice steering and it's also pretty urban friendly. So if that's what you're going to do, hey, then this should be fine for you. But I will also say that the Crosstrek is actually one of the more off-road capable little SUVs that you can buy. Hit the link in the description or at the top of your screen there to check out my shorts video of this car, well, not the hybrid version, but the petrol one going off-road. I was really surprised at how capable it actually was. We should really talk about efficiency and whether this thing makes sense if you do the maths. Now, if someone was to walk up to you and say, look, here's $3,600, you can do whatever you want with that, you'd be thinking, hey, I could use that money. I could do something fun with that. I could maybe go on a little holiday, take the family away, whatever it may be. That's what you have to pay to get into a hybrid version of the Crosstrek, and that would be a waste of money in my opinion. Look, you would have to do tens of thousands of kilometers to recoup the cost in order to make it make sense to choose the hybrid version, because when it comes to efficiency, as you'll see, the numbers on your screen will show that the hybrid doesn't make sense. Like the petrol version, the number is on your screen now for the normal versions of this car, and now you'll see the hybrid fuel consumption figure. That is not a big enough difference. And look, admittedly, Subaru does describe it as a mild hybrid system, and it is mild. And if you're wondering what you might be able to achieve across a mix of driving in the real world, I've done it for you. You'll see my figure on the screen now. And yeah, no, nope, it's a nope fest. It's not good enough. And if you're wondering about longer term ownership costs, well, this is a pretty expensive compact SUV to maintain. There is a cap price servicing plan for the first 5 years or 75,000 Ks, and it works out at about $475 per year to maintain, which is not all that cheap. It's almost double the cost of a Corolla Cross. I can understand why you would want a Subaru Crosstrek. I can understand why you'd want a hybrid compact SUV, but I can't understand why you would buy the Subaru Crosstrek Hybrid. It just doesn't make enough sense to me, considering the cost that you have to pay to get into the hybrid version and the fact that it isn't all that much more efficient in real world driving or even on paper. So to me, it doesn't really make that much sense, but I'd love to know what you think. If you've already bought one, tell me if you are happy with it or if you regret your decision. I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.